like to welcome everybody to our Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation Annual Remembrance Day Ceremony 2021. This is the day where we acknowledge and recognize our MCFN veterans who have passed on to their next journey, and those that grace us with their presence here today walking Mother Earth. I'd like to call upon the Big Train Drum Group to start us off with the veteran song. Right now, I'd like to call upon Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation Chief, R. Stacy LaForme. So we always want to do things in a respectful and a good way, and that's why we carry as much ceremony and discipline from the veteran services as we can. But you'll also notice that it speaks to Indigenous ingenuity at the same time, which I think is important to remember too. I know it's been a difficult time in our world, and with the pandemic, the uncovering of our children, and our own personal tragedies in the community. It's been a challenging world for us, but it's important that we come together and remember those veterans and those warriors who gave so much that we could even be here today. So it's important that we be here and honor them. So I'd like to offer you to recite the prayer Remember, or the veterans poem that I wrote called Remember a few years ago now. Remember, to all those who've gone before, to all the people that went to war, to the men and women who faced death, to those who will never again draw breath, to the mothers and fathers whose children gave all, to the husbands and wives whose mate answered the call, to the child who faced life on their own, to everyone who talks to a name on a stone. No medal or ribbon can repay all that we owe. The parade and applause are not enough, and we know. I want to say thank you, but no words are enough for what you went through. There was one promise that I can give, one oath that I shall never break for as long as I live. I'll remember that we owe all to you, a person, a people I never even knew. I will remember.
Which Chief? I'd like to acknowledge the invited delegates that we have in attendance today. We have MPP from Brantford, Mr. Will Boma. He's standing at the back. Unfortunately, the Six Nations Veterans Association are unable to join us today. And the Hagersville Veterans Association, if they're in attendance. And we have Six Nations Chief and Council Representative Helen Miller. Now I'd like to call upon Mr. Mark Reform, who is going to sing the Canadian and U.S. national anthems.
Our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. The American anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at twilight's last gleam, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight over ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red clear, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner still wave over land of the free and the home of the brave?
Miigwech Mark. So right now I'd like to acknowledge and recognize the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation veterans that we do have in attendance today. If you would like to stand so we can recognize you, and all that you are here. our veterans, if you can stand.
Well, we thought you were going to call our names out.
So we got Elder Gary Sue, we got Michelle Salt, I know we got Counselor Bill LaForme, and then I'm unaware if we do have any more, so Miigwech. Right now I'd like to do the roll call of our past and present veterans before we go into the last post. So World War I, the Great War, 1914 to 1918. Lieutenant Cameron Daniel Brandt, Private Maxwell Tobico, Corporal Albert W. L. Crane, Private Thomas Secord, Private Daniel LaForme, Private Herbert LaForme, Private John Wesley LaForme, Private Samuel LaForme, Private Oswald Jacob King, Private Wilfred King, Private Francis W. Crane, Private John H. Crane, Private David Herkimer, Private George Ira Herkimer, Private Solomon Spencer, Private Alfred Jones Chubb, Private George R. Salt, Percival J. Wood, Private Wallace Langford Sterling, Private Joseph Chubb Jr., Private John A. LaForme, Private Morley LaForme, Private Elias LaForme, Private John King, Private George Joseph King, Private Percy F. King, Private Charles Tobico, Private Elgin Brandt, Private Jacob LaForme, Private Joseph Sterling, Benjamin Chubb, Peter LaForme Jr., Melvin McDougall, Alexander LaForme, Arthur Henry, and Richard Henry. Our veteran for World War II, 1939 to 1945. Maxwell J. King, Arthur H. Crane, Lewis Elliott King, Jacob S. Brandt, Leo Smith LaForme, David Jack LaForme, Norman Spencer, Sergeant Lewis M. LaForme, William M. E. Tobico, Frederick W. G. King, Robert Osborne Earl King, Norman Henry, Lawrence Albert LaForme, Oliver Wesley LaForme, Robert C. Brandt, Private George L. King, James L. LaForme, Norman A. King, Ivan E. LaForme, Wesley Salt, Wilfred R. Crane, Stephen H. Herkimer, Joseph Henry, Private Hazel Jane King Haggard, Joseph Tobico, Charles A. Salt, Earl Wood, Graham King, James Bruce LaForme, Lucy LaForme, and Joseph Salt. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953. Carl Blake Salt, Gordon M. LaForme, Joseph Salt, U.S. Serving in peacetime, Lauren W. King, Irving Salt, Lamont Salt, Garner Salt, Orville Salt, Sergeant M. Brian LaForme, Corporal A. Mark LaForme, Sonny Wayne Watson, Philip Tobico, William Roger LaForme, Frank S. Bonham LaForme, Raymond Walter Schuler, Michelle Ann Salt, Albert E. Sue Sr., Gary Sue, Albert E. Sue Jr., United States, Mike T. Sue, United States, Marvin R. Doney, Norman Craig, Stephen Bonham, and Richard Crane. Currently serving right now, Brock Marshall Secord and Stephen Ruff Bonham.